Hello, my name is Margaret Cameron. I'm Associate Director for Recruitment and Admissions, and with me today is Krista Maston, um, who will be talking about applying for your Canadian study permit and giving you all the information that you'll need to get started with that process. So the first thing we wanted to mention is that Mount Allison this year will be offering for the first time a special study permit support service. So basically this service will involve a free consultation by email to a registered immigration consultant who will review the documents that you will be submitting for your application and provide feedback and suggestions on anything that you should improve or if you need further documentation to really make a strong case to IRCC. So we really encourage all Mount Allison students to access this service. Basically, when you pay your deposit, your $2,500 deposit to Mount Allison, you will receive your LOA and your PAL, and then you will be able to access this service, and we will send you more information about it once you have paid the deposit. So again, if you are coming for fall 2025, please make sure to use this before you submit your application if possible. And basically the documents that we would be needing for you to start this consultation service is your proof of acceptance, so your letter of acceptance from Mount Allison, your provincial attestation letter, proof of identity, so a copy of your passport, proof of financial support, so how you are planning to finance your studies in Canada. So there is a template, and it will also mention some of the documents that we would need for financial support proof. A letter of explanation, which details why you want to study in Canada and that you understand your responsibilities as a student. And then you also will need to check the visa office instructions for your country or region or local requirements. So there are country-specific documents for each country that you can find on the IRCC website, which is linked here as well. And students will not be able to start their consultation until all of the documents are provided. So if you only send your LOA, that won't be enough to get the process started. So just be aware of that, prepare everything in advance, and then send it to the consultant. So I'm going to hand it over to Krista to talk more about the process and how you actually go about doing this in your IRCC account.
Thank you, Margaret. So as Margaret mentioned, my name is Krista Maston, and I'm the International Student Advisor here at Mount A. So in my role, I'm kind of the main point of contact for international students once you begin. So it starts with international orientation when you first start at Mount A, and then I'm here for students as you progress through your degree. And so I'm going to be walking you through the study permit application process. And you may know, like, I'm not sure if students would have, taken a look yet at the IRCC systems. And IRCC stands for Immigration, Refugee, Citizenship Canada. So it is the Immigration Department of Canada. But there are two portals. So just so that students aren't confused, there is one system that is called the IRCC portal, and there is another system which is called the IRCC secure account. And it may be that when you go into the system, it's directing you to the portal right now, but that portal is going to be closing in the next few weeks. And so we are recommending that students stick with the secure account. So that is what we will be guiding students through today. It's also what our guide on our website will direct students through. So we strongly recommend that you stick with what is called the secure account, just so that we don't have any applications kind of lost in the portal that is shutting down. So this is the website that you'll be going to start your application. Again, we have a step-by-step guide on our website. As far as processing times, I mean, you can check the IRCC site for estimated processing times for your country. It is approximately 15 weeks, and so it could be shorter depending on what country you're applying from. It could be longer as well. So we have found in the past that those are kind of rough estimates. Really, as soon as possible is best if you can submit your application as soon as possible. So you can go to the next slide there, Margaret, please. So this is so once you go into the system, and again, the guide will take you through what to expect to set up your account, essentially creating a username and password, setting some security questions. It does take some time to go through and answer, create your questions. And again, it's always a good idea to write down your security questions and answers, because you will be prompted each time to answer one of those. So you don't want to forget what those responses were. But this slide shows you what you will see once you get into the system. So you can see it will view for you the applications that you've already submitted. So once you've submitted your application, you can go back into the system to see any updates on the application, or just to confirm details that you might have about those, or questions that you might have about those. You can also start an application and then leave the system and come back in and restart. So you can see where it says continue an application you have submitted. So this might be helpful if you want to go in and get the systems, your application set up, but maybe you don't have all of the required documents ready the first time that you sign in. So that's okay. Your application will stay live for 60 days. So you have 60 days once you start to then go back in and kind of work on that same application. And so how to get started is, you'll see it says start an application. And so you just click the link that says apply to come to Canada. And so Margaret, you can go to the next slide. Okay, so then once you click that apply to come to Canada, you'll get to this page, which says personal checklist. There is an option where you can get a reference code. But you don't need to do that in advance. There's no advantage. So you can just go right to, I do not have a personal reference code. And so where I have circled red, you'll click visitor visa, study, and or work permit. And then this is, Margaret, where I guess I'll have to share my screen, because I'll take you through the questions. So this is what you'll see when you're in the system. Again, I'm going to kind of take you through the application, just so you can see it's quite straightforward. And I think it's helpful for students, maybe before you get in there, to see what questions they ask. It is important for you to answer these truthfully for yourself. So I'm going to be providing answers based on, kind of current or typical student situations, but it's very important that you answer correctly for yourself. So for the question, what would you like to do in Canada? The answer would be study. You are applying for a study permit. How long are you planning to stay in Canada? You would say temporarily more than 6 months, because the program at Mount Allison you're enrolling in would be more than 6 months. The country code of your passport. So again, this would depend on what country you're applying from, or the passport, your passport issuance, but I'll just say India for now. Your current country or territory of residence. So this is where you are presently living. So you may have an Indian passport, but perhaps you're living in Dubai. So you need to answer this question. So where you are currently physically living, like where your residence is. So again, that may be different from your passport. If you're in Canada, you would answer Canada to that. And that's important because it does change, it may change the documents that they ask you to submit. Do you have a family member who is a Canadian citizen or PR? So when they say family member, they are referring to a spouse or a dependent child, or a child of a dependent. So for most students, this will be no. They're not talking about aunts and uncles. And if you have questions as you go through, you can see that there's links and also sometimes question marks. You can click those and they'll give you more information about what they mean. Okay, so for date of birth, I'll just put anything in here. You would answer your date of birth. So here's the question about the provincial attestation letter, which Margaret referenced. If you're not familiar with recent changes to the Canadian study permit application process, now students are required to have a provincial attestation letter from the province that they're going to be attending their school. And so again, Mount Allison will take care of this for you. We will issue your provincial attestation letter after you pay your registration deposit. So the answer to this question would be yes, that you do have a provincial attestation letter. If you're in a situation where you think that you meet an exception, then I would always say confirm with admissions or myself first. For most situations, you will require a provincial attestation letter. So what province is your letter from? That would be New Brunswick. So Mount Allison is located in the province of New Brunswick. Are you a lawful permanent resident of the United States? So again, this would depend on your situation. I'll just say yes, because I am answering as a student. Have you traveled directly to Canada from the US or Saint-Pierre and Miquelon? So again, this would be dependent on your situation. I will say no to this. Have you been accepted to a designated learning institution? Mount Allison is a designated learning institution, so this would be yes. Are you planning to attend a post-secondary learning institution? Yes. So this question, we often get questions about. So have you visited or lived in a designated country for 6 months of the last year? So you can see the list of designated countries on the IRCC site. So if you click on this, it will take you there. I'm not going to do that right now. Also in our guide, which we linked earlier in the presentation, it does have, again, the link to the IRCC site that lists all of the designated countries. So essentially, if you have been in a designated country for more than 6 months of the last year, you need to have a medical exam as part of your application. So that's what this would, that's what this question is referring to. So I will say no, but it will be dependent on your situation. Have you had a medical exam performed by IRCC authorized panel physician? So again, this is just, so if you have had one done, then you can say yes to this. Even if you require one, you don't need to say yes to this question. If you say yes to this question, it will provide you a space in your document upload page for you to upload that, that result of your medical exam. If you say no to this and you do require a medical exam, it will give you a letter, like a medical exam letter that you use to get your medical exam done. So again, just answer this correctly or accurately. So whether or not you have had a medical performed by an IRCC physician. So your marital status, again, answer as correct. What is your province of destination? So again, this would be New Brunswick again. Okay, so you can see we've gone through the first section, and you'll see that you are eligible to apply for a study permit from outside of Canada. So we're almost there, it says. Are you an exchange student? So again, if you are an exchange student coming to Mount Allison for a short-term program, then you would answer yes. For most students, this will be no. Is work an essential component of your studies? So many students will want to work while they are in Canada and while they're studying, but this question is asking if you are in a co-op program which requires a work component. So it has a mandatory work component. And the answer to this for all Mount Allison students will be no, because we don't have any formal co-op programs. Saying no to this does not mean that you won't be able to work in Canada. So your study permit should give you the authorization to work on and off campus while a student. This question is not speaking to that. So this is just talking about whether or not you're in a co-op program. And so for Mount A students, you're not in a co-op program. Are you a spouse, common law partner of certain skilled workers? So again, this would, answer correctly. For most of you, this will be no. And then are you a recipient of these scholarship programs? Again, if you are, you will know that, but for most students, that will be no. Are you accompanying a family member that has status in Canada? So again, a lot of times students are like asked this question, like, well, I'm, like maybe my parents are coming with me. Do they count as an accompanying family member? But this is talking about whether you are moving to reside in Canada with a family member. Okay, so for most students, again, this will be no. Have you ever committed, been arrested for, or charged of any offense in any other country? Again, answer accurately. I'll say no. Do you want to submit an application for a family member? So typically this will be no. Again, if you are in a situation where you have a spouse or a dependent and you're hoping to apply for an immigration document for them, you would answer yes to this. Typically, like again, if you're hoping to travel with parents that they will come and get you settled in, we would typically not recommend that you would add that type of application to your study permit. We would say concentrate on the study permit first, and then your family member can apply separately for their applications. Are you giving someone access to your application? So if you are working with an immigration consultant who is submitting the application for you, you could answer this. Typically, the answer will be no. Margaret did mention access to an immigration consultant through Mount Allison. In this situation, the answer to this would still be no. You would still be submitting the application yourself. You're just getting some assistance from the consultant, but you would still say no to this in that situation. In the past years, have you given your fingerprints and photos? So for most students, you likely will have not. If you have, so if you've given your biometrics for a previous application, you submitted to IRCC, then you would answer yes to this. There are fees associated? Will you be paying your fees? So again, in most situations, yes, you will be paying your fees. Are you able to make digital copies of your documents? So you have to say yes to this. I mean, you do need access. You need to be able to scan your documents to upload into the online system. Will you be paying your application fees online? So this would be recommended that you have access to a credit card to be able to pay in the system. And then you'll just get to the review page. So this is a good time to review, make sure you haven't answered anything incorrectly. If you have, you can simply press the pencil icon, the edit icon, and make changes. That's fine. If everything is correct, you'll say continue. And then you will get to, so when you're in the system, it will look a little bit different. You will have on the right-hand side here, buttons that will allow you to upload these documents. I'm outside of the system right now, so it's just giving me the list of documents that I need. So you can see there's one application form. So all students will have an application for a study permit made outside of Canada. And then these are our supporting documents. Again, depending on your country of residence, your country of citizenship, you may have an additional document in this list. This is kind of the basic. Everybody will see this list of documents. So a few notes, like the application, this is a PDF application. If you just simply click this, it's going to try to open the document in your browser, in your internet browser, and you will get an error. It will say, please wait, and you will continue to wait. It will never open. So again, in the guide, I give some tips, but essentially you need to download that document. So there are a few ways you could do that, but I would say, save link as. Let's see if I can open this in a new window. So it'll show you. Oh, it takes you here. So I click on this. So again, depending on your computer, this might look different, but you can see that I have this downloaded here. So you do need to download the form. If you're having a lot of issues, you could just go to the IRCC site as well and put in this application number, and it will take you to the page that has that application form. So this is what it looks like. Can you see that? Margaret, or okay, I wasn't sure if it was sharing just the browser. So this is what it looks like. It's a 4-page document. Oh, correct, it's 4 pages. That, just asks a lot of questions, everything from, your name as it appears on your passport, date of birth, country of citizenship. It will also ask you questions about your intended studies in Canada. So it's quite straightforward, I would say. Again, if you have any questions, that's where you could, get the consultant feedback. But it's quite straightforward. And so once you're finished, actually, I'll just note, once you're finished with this application, we often get questions from students about the signature. So you don't need to print and sign this application form when you're doing an online application. You just need to validate. So this validation will confirm that you've answered all of the required questions. And if you haven't, it will actually bring you back to that field and say, and highlight it in red that you've not answered a required question. But once you have done everything that's necessary and you clicked validate, you will see a text box pop up that says validation is complete. You do not need to sign this. You can upload directly to the application portal. So that's the application form. And then here are the documents that you would require. So Margaret already referenced the letter of acceptance and the provincial attestation letter. So number 1 and 3 on that list. Those 2 will be provided from Mount Allison. Your passport, so that's simply a scan of your passport. You can see when you click on here that they want copy of your travel document. So they want, first of all, a scan of the page of your photo page, but also any stamps or visas that are located in your passport. So essentially any page of your passport that has any stamps, markings, visas, you will also scan those along with your photo page. And then you'll see the only other 2 documents that are kind of the basic required documents are your proof of financial support, as well as your digital photo, which is a passport style photo. So I think for there, I might just stop there because we'll get into the proof of financial support, but there's more details located within the PowerPoint, Margaret. So this is what you can expect when you are in the system. Again, when you are logged in, you will actually see buttons beside each of the documents, an upload option. So that's where you upload the documents. You can only upload one document, one file for each of those fields. So for your proof of financial support, it is very likely that you will have many pages or, more than one page for sure. So it just means that you need to scan all of those documents together so that you have one file for uploading. So Margaret, maybe we can jump back over and I'll get into proof of financial support a bit more.
Yes. Second. Okay, and I just wanted to note there was a question about how to get the provincial attestation letter. So again, you're going to pay your $2,500 deposit to accept your offer to Mount Allison. And then at that point, we will issue your letter of acceptance. So you would have gotten an offer letter, but we call it letter of acceptance, which is the one that IRCC would like to see. It's formatted with specific information that they need. And then there's also the provincial attestation letter. So both of those will be issued after you pay your deposit, accepting your offer to Mount Allison. Okay, back to Krista, I think.
Yes. So before we get to proof of financial support, this is a very, very important topic for a study permit application, because as you see in the when I showed you the system, it gave you the required application form and supporting documents. But very importantly, you do need to check the country specific visa office instructions to see what other requirements and what other documentation your specific visa office wants to see. It is very, very, very important for you to do this. We often see students only submit the basic kind of those required mandatory documents, and they will see rejections. You really need to look at those visa office instructions to see what other documentation is required. So as noted on the slide, it often will give you preferred option for proof of funds. So again, I will go over general information about financial support requirements, but your visa office instructions may give information about what that specific visa office wants to see. So the visa office in India is looking for different things than the visa office in Singapore, for example. So because I was not in the system when I was showing you the questionnaire and the upload page, you didn't see, there is an optional document section that you will see when you are in the system. And so under the application form and those supporting document requirements, under that you'll see optional documents, and there's a client information field. That's where you will add any of those additional documents that you see noted in the visa office instructions. Anything else to add to that, Margaret? So again, this is linked here. You would just go to that page, you put in your country, and then you will see you'll see a page that has a number of documents. It will give you again the application form again, but you'll see one of the documents in the list will be visa office instructions, and you'll open that. It's a PDF document, and you can read through it to make sure that you're not missing anything that your specific visa office wants to see. So a lot of the visa office instructions will note that they want a letter of explanation or a study plan. And some visa offices actually give you the questions that they want you to answer in that letter. Even if your visa office doesn't request a letter of explanation or a study plan or a letter of intent, we recommend that you write one because it really allows you to explain your goals and your situation. It gives you a chance to kind of fill in any gaps that might be there that aren't told from just those basic documents that you're submitting. So we've kind of included a few options here of what to note. Again, your visa office instructions might give you specific questions to answer. So as a minimum, you want to talk about why you want to study in Canada and at Mount Allison. So, you want to show that you've kind of done your research and you know what Canada, what New Brunswick, what Mount Allison have to offer, and why you are choosing that specific school, and that, why you're choosing Canada. You want to speak to how your studies in Canada at Mount A will fit in with your future career goals. Again, this will be dependent on your situation. If you're coming right out of high school, then obviously you'll just be talking about how your post-secondary studies will fit with what you want to do in the future. If you have any gaps between your high school studies and then now applying to come to Canada, you want to explain those gaps and maybe how what you did during that time fits in with your future goals of studying in Canada. You want to speak to the ties you have in your home country. And you may be asking, why? Why do I need to talk about the ties that I have to my home country? A study permit application is a temporary resident immigration document. So what that means is that you need to, as anyone who's applying for a study permit needs to demonstrate that they plan to come to Canada temporarily, that your main objective is to come for your studies and to come for your studies temporarily. Now, there may be options for you to stay afterwards, and a lot of students do have that in mind when they're applying for a study permit. They may choose Canada because of the options that may exist after your studies. But for your study permit application, you don't want to be referring to those goals that go beyond this temporary resident application. Because again, you need to satisfy the immigration officer that's reading your application that you will, if required to, or if no opportunities exist, you will return home after you finish your studies. And so talking about your ties to your home country is a way to demonstrate that, right? So if you have ties to your home country, then it shows an officer that after your studies at Mount A, you still have opportunities and ties to your country to return to. So you can also, the next point says that you will return home following your period of authorized stay in Canada. So again, you can be explicit, you can state this, right, in your application. If you're not in your home country, so if you, again, we'll use the same example where if I hold a passport that was issued by India, but I'm living in Singapore, for example, you want to provide documentation to support your status in the country that you are currently living in. So we see this quite a bit actually, where a student may just not address that. So, you provide your passport, but again, it's not a requirement to include these other pieces. But what we see is that immigration officers will often want to see that information. So they want you to provide your proof of residence in the country where you're living, if that's not your home, if that's not your citizenship country. But it's also noted here that if you need a travel document to re-enter your country of residence, you would want to provide that as documentation as well. So again, this is an example. If you are in a situation like this, I would recommend to talk to our immigration consultant. Like this would be an example where that would be very helpful for you to get some guidance on what to include. But just to note here that you should be addressing that in your letter of explanation or in your study plan. And then again, just any other unique personal circumstances that may be related to your application. But the point about this being a temporary resident application is really important, because sometimes we see students in their study plans talking about, plans to become a permanent resident in Canada. And that can be an issue for a study permit application, because you are applying to be a temporary resident, not to be a permanent resident. So you really need to keep that tight. You need to be talking about your goals for your studies, and you need to also be satisfying the officer that at the end of your studies, you do have opportunities to return home or to return to your country of residence. And now we will get to the proof of financial support. So the proof of financial support, they changed this about a year ago. So it used to be a $10,000 living expense requirement, and then that went up. So now it will adjust, slightly each year, because there's a formula that they're using. But for this year, for 2025, if you are a single applicant, so you don't have any dependents, the requirement for your living expenses, so the cost of living, is 20,635 Canadian, in addition to your first year tuition and any travel costs. So you can see there, it's just over 40,000 that would be required if you were coming to Mount Allison. So the requirements, the rules for a study permit application is that you need to demonstrate your finances for your first year of studies. So that's whether you're applying to a 1-year program or a 4-year program. The minimum is that you need to show that you have your first year of studies funds. However, the officer that's looking at your application is also looking at the probability of funding for future years. So this is important, because sometimes we'll see students having kind of like a lump sum amount in a bank account, and then that's all they're showing for their proof of funds. That doesn't really tell an officer like where those funds came from, and is there opportunity for continued funding? You're applying for a 4-year program at Mount A. If you're only showing a lump sum amount that covers the minimum in a bank account, it doesn't tell the story of how you're planning to fund your studies continue like after that first year. So other examples. So again, if continued funding comes from your parents' employment, there could be employment letters, for example. Your parent or whoever's funding you can write a letter. You can write a letter that explains what the plan is for your full year, for your full 4 years, and then provide that documentation to satisfy that. So this is another example. I mean, proof of financial support may be the #1 reason why applications are refused. And again, oftentimes it's not that the finances aren't there, it's that the applicant didn't tell a clear enough story and provide the appropriate documents to really satisfy an officer that those funds are there. Yeah, I think there is another page on financial support as well.
Yes,
Margaret.
there is. And I was just gonna say, and you're probably gonna add this point in the next slide maybe, but you can't be stating that working in Canada is how you're going to pay for your tuition. So sometimes, you know, students are thinking about that. They do want to have a part-time job, and that may help with some of their costs, but that cannot be your financial plan when submitting to IRCC. And it shouldn't be your financial plan initially anyway. It's a bonus to be able to work while you study, but it's not guaranteed. So just keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah, so this list is from the IRCC site, and you will see that there is no mention of jobs or, like as far as, planning to work in Canada. And as Margaret says, that it's not a good plan anyways. You really can't plan to kind of work part-time as a student and fund your studies in Canada. So the documents that you're providing need to not include work in Canada. So you'll see, proof of a Canadian bank account if you've transferred money to Canada, obviously proof of your bank account at home if that's what you're using, a GIC, so a guaranteed investment certificate, which is available in some countries, student loans, bank drafts, proof that you've paid tuition and housing fees. This is a strong proof of financial support, especially again for that proof of tuition payment. So it's not a requirement that you pay that upfront. It could be, just that you're showing that those funds are available, but certainly it is really strong proof to IRCC that you've actually made that transfer to Mount Allison. And just a note on that: if your application were refused, you would, you'd be issued a refund for any amounts beyond the deposit, the non-refundable deposit amount. Again, a letter from the person giving you money. This is always a good example or a good idea. Even if it is your parents, having a letter that explains where the money is coming from and what the plan is always a good idea. You can also use your scholarship. So you may have an offer of a scholarship. You can use that as well. But just to note, so it's fine to use that, but it may not be seen from IRCC as the strongest proof of funding beyond year 1, because a lot of scholarships, you need to have a certain academic performance to renew that scholarship or a bursary or something like that. And so you may have intentions of continuing, to succeeding academically and keeping that funding. But for IRCC, they'll want to see, again, really they're looking for individuals to be able to support beyond, again, scholarships from the schools. But you can certainly include that, and it can again help you reach that minimum threshold for your first year of studies. And another note about the country-specific visa instructions. If there's anything that you take out of this presentation, it is please review the country-specific visa instructions and make sure that you include anything that is noted in your country's guides. Okay, steps, your Canadian study permit. So you have submitted your application, you've paid the fees, you've submitted all of your documents. So what's next? So step 2 is biometrics. So again, as I noted, some students may have provided biometrics to IRC previously. If that's the case, you won't have this step 2. Most of you will be submitting your biometrics. And so how that works, after you submit your application in step 1, again, now you have your online account. Any mail or requests that come from IRCC will go through that online account. And within 24 to 48 hours, you should receive a biometrics instruction letter. So it's sometimes referred to as a BIL, so biometrics instruction letter. So this is the letter that you will take to the biometrics collection site that is closest to your home, and get your fingerprints and photo taken for your application. So the document that is automatically issued to you after you submit your application, it will give you the instructions of how to register for an appointment, and go and have that. I think it's 30 days that you have after you submit your application to go and have your biometrics submitted. And then it is helpful. So again, if you're not sure where the closest biometrics collection center is for you, you may want to have a look, because for many students, you may have to travel, whether in country, not commonly outside of country, but you may have to travel a couple of hours. And so you do want to have an idea of how, plan your travel and plan your dates. A medical exam, so you may have to get your a medical exam. There is an option to do an upfront medical exam. So if you are living in a designated country which requires a medical exam, you can either do it before your application, because if it's a requirement, you will have to submit it at some point. So many applicants will do it ahead of time. And then when you answer that question in your application, you'll say, yes, I have had a medical exam. And then you just submit it along with your initial application. If you haven't done that, then you will be requested to have that medical exam done. And so again, that would be through your online system. You would get a document that would give you the details of how to book your medical exam.
And just a note on that, because I've gotten a question about it before, it's not just any doctor that you can get to do this medical exam. There are specified ones by IRCC. So yeah.
And again, the instruction letter would give you that information, but you can also just look at the IRCC site, and they will give you the list of doctors that, again, qualified doctors or panel physicians, as they're called, that are in your home country, so that you can see where the closest one might be. And then you wait. So that's it. So submit your application, biometrics if required, medical if required, and then it's waiting. Again, 12 to 15 weeks is kind of an average of the processing times. It may be shorter, it may be longer than that. One note, we often will get students asking us if they can ask for an update on their application. Generally, the answer is no. But if the stated processing time on the site for your country says 12 weeks, and then you've been waiting 20, at that point, you can request an update. So it's through the IRCC web form. So if you just Google a web form, it's essentially a way to kind of email or message the IRCC. And so at that point, you could, that's one of the options, is to say, that your application has taken longer than the stated processing time. Again, that might not be helpful for you, but it is something that you can do, is request an update if your application is taking longer than the stated time.
We also get a lot of questions about, oh, can you contact IRCC for us and see what's going on with my application? Unfortunately, we have no power over those decisions, and we don't have a special line that we can call IRCC and ask them questions. So yeah, unfortunately not. step
Yeah.
5.
So step 5 is a passport request. And so this is if you're a passport holder for a country that requires a visa, so that's the sticker that goes in your passport, then before you receive an approval, you'll actually receive a passport request letter, again, into your online system, which should give you an email as well. You can set that up so that when you that it will give you an email, send you an email when you have a message in your account. And so when you see a passport request letter, that's a good sign. And so that means that your application has been processed, and they just will give you your visa, and before they issue your approval letter. If you are a passport holder for a country that doesn't require a visa, then you will just automatically get the approval letter, and not a passport request letter. And then step 6, approved. And so what you will receive, you don't receive your actual study permit when you're approved. That is, your study permit is issued when you enter Canada. So at the first airport that you enter in Canada, or if you're crossing a land border at the land crossing office. But you are given what we refer to as a letter of introduction. And so this letter is your approval letter. So it says that you've been approved. Please present this letter when you enter Canada, and then your study permit is issued at that time. And then you travel to Canada.
So we just have a note here that once your study permit has been approved, please upload a copy of it. So if it's like the visa in the passport, for example, your initial approval letter, whatever you have at that point to indicate that you have been approved, please send it to us for our records so we know that you will indeed be coming. You may not get this for a few months now, but whenever you get that update, please let us know, because otherwise you may have to take other steps. If you apply late, you may have to defer to a future intake, something like that. So we want to be able to support you as well with your most recent update and advise you accordingly. And you can either upload this to your application account. You should have a supplemental item that says study permit, or you can email it to international@mta.ca. And we have 2 emails here. So again, the international@mta.ca is the main one for admissions questions. You can also email the admissions@mta email, but international is a bit more specific for you guys. And then we also have the International Center email. So at this point, most of your questions should be going to international@mta.ca, as we're helping you through the recruitment and admission process. When it gets closer to the actual term, you may be interacting more directly with the International Center. Usually kind of maybe in the summer that might start, but for now, international@mta.ca is the main email you should be contacting. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing. And there is another question here. So I am a US citizen. If I go to the port of entry, do I still need a letter of explanation?
We don't typically see US citizens requiring a letter of explanation. I mean, again, it doesn't hurt. It's not going to hurt anything to have a letter of explanation, but it's not a standard document that the US visa office is looking for. So again, it's kind of like if there's anything in your situation where you feel like you want to explain, like again, that's what a letter of explanation is for, right? Because those standard required documents don't necessarily give you an opportunity to explain anything that might not be clear with your documents. So typically not required, the letter of explanation, but I would say like for the financial, the proof of funding, it's still a good idea to at least have an outline of how you're planning on paying for your studies over the 4 years. And Margaret, I don't know where that's included, but so we do have kind of a template for you to use to explain your proof of funding plan. And I think that's sent to students, isn't Margaret? Yeah.
Yes, we've been generally sending it to students along with the letter of acceptance, your LOA, and your provincial attestation letter, your PAL. Okay, so this is a question. I will be having my mom live with me. What other documents need to be submitted? That I don't know if that's one we can cover necessarily in a webinar, but
Yeah. Um, and I'm just wondering, Michelle, if that's a situation where you may be, like, is this because you are, like you require a dependent and your mother is coming? This would be a situation where I would say, like if your mother is traveling with you and planning to live with you, this would be, something that you could discuss once you have your documentation ready. And again, you're connected. You can connect with our immigration consultant. They could let you know what other, because this would be a situation where there's probably an additional document you want to include to explain, yeah, your personal situation and what the plan is.
yeah. So we'll let that be a further conversation. Okay, so I think we'll wrap it up here. We're just about the end of our time. So thank you for listening. We hope this was helpful and have a wonderful rest of your day or evening or night wherever you are. So thank you very much and bye for now.